Honorable Fikile, Honorable Sharif, Agasipat. Honorable Van der Merwe. Ukon. Miss N. Zibande. Action 8, Miss N. Zibande. Miss L. Mateis, Gender Dynamics. Now what we are going to do, we are going to start with the questions.
Yes, let's. So it's the opportunity for people to contribute, and then the resource panel will respond after. So ask them what to do is we can't have a situation where people speak and then everybody here speaks. We rather have like maybe one or two from respond from the resource, we give it back to the floor, and then a few others can respond.
You know what we are intending to do, because we've got only 1 hour. We are going to allow. How do we switch the button? Oh, sometimes we are discussing. Okay, I'll first give it to you to speak. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, honorable members. The panel members are here. We'll now give to T. Bram to make a presentation for only 5 minutes. And then after her presentation, all members that are here, you'll then ask questions, make comments and ask questions. Each person will just comment for 2 minutes. So, you know, this thing of a background and what, my preambles, you must avoid it. You go straight to the point, because once you start with preambles and the history, you're gonna miss your time of asking a question. I think in the morning they introduced me as Nonhlanhla Ncubendaba, the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee for Women, Youth and Persons Living with Disability. So we are now starting. We were thinking that everybody that is here, was here in the morning, is gonna be punctual. So we can see even when we delay our meeting, now it's almost 3:15. So we are running out of time. So we are starting. Over to you, Ms. Bram. Ms. Bram is one of the members of the Interim Steering Committee on GBV.
Thank you, Honourable Programme Director, and all protocols observed. Welcome back. I hope everybody's feeling well fed and good about being here and excited about our conversation. I think very much was a key thing for me that emerged in many of our inputs this morning is that the time for talking is over, right? We need action on this issue. It came through very strongly throughout the morning, and at a very core part of, we can put a national strategic plan in place, but if we do not focus on resourcing, we're not going to go very far. And so I think the discussion that we want to have now really is to focus on that element of the national strategic plan. And there are many people in the chamber who I think may have many good ideas on how to shape that part of the national strategic plan, what should go into it. And I think the way we've, in some of our conversations with, and consultations, the way we've understood resourcing is about budget, right? Resourcing is also about human beings. Resourcing is also technical. Resourcing is also infrastructure. So it's a wide area. And I think the way we want to focus our discussion now is to look at what are the key priorities, or how should that part of the plan be shaped? What's the advice based on where people who are in the chamber find themselves? What's the kind of direction that should take? And I think in relation to what we've been hearing so far, there's some of the kind of priority areas have been about strengthening services, looking at how we prioritize and mainstream prevention, scaling up programs, for example, around parenting and alcohol abuse, also using the gender responsive planning, budgeting framework to actually make sure that budgets go to the NSP. I'm not going to say much more, and then of course the structure. So those are some of the areas that we've been thinking about in relation to resourcing. And I think the way we wanted to do this conversation is really to allow people here to fully to engage and give suggestions around what they think those priorities are. And then we have a panel of people behind me who are actually going to assist with responding to some of those areas. And we'll do that right at the end. We've just been guided by the program director that we're going to spend most of the time in the session now hearing what people's ideas are, what your guidance is, and at the end, we'll give an opportunity for the panel to come in. But I just thought by way of just kicking off quickly, Program Director, if the panel could just introduce themselves, just literally the name and the organization that you're coming from.
No, you can finish your presentation. They will introduce
Oh,
themselves
okay.
after.
Okay. So coming back to what I was saying, I think that we've also, in our discussions on resourcing, looked at a number of critical approaches that are important. The one issue is, of course, around state accountability, using both vertical programs as well as looking at integration in budgets, including IDPs. The other issue is the importance of looking at how one develops a fund that can specifically respond to the critical issues on gender-based violence. The other area that we've also been hearing and exploring is support by the private sector, particularly around using workplaces as a platform to implement the National Strategic Plan. So those are some of the ideas, but Program Director, I'd rather step back and allow people to engage and share their ideas around what they think the resourcing priority should be.
Okay, thank you very much. For the benefit of those who came late, this session now is for you to make comments and ask questions, but each person will have 2 minutes to speak. So please don't try to talk about history, preambles, and so on and so on. So you must just be straight to the point so that we can be able to manage our time, because we've got only 1 hour. Already 15 minutes is gone. So that tells you that we have only 45 minutes left. Over to you, members of the panel. May you please introduce yourselves?
Good afternoon. My name is Onika Nonhlanhla-Makwakwa. I'm with the Interim Steering Committee for Gender-Based Violence.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Liberty from an organization called Gender Dynamics. We are trans-led, transgender-led, and a transgender-specific organization. And I'm sitting on this panel in that capacity as a transgender woman as well. I was really hoping to see more transgender faces in the room, or people that were visibly transgender, to be able to hold and toe the line as to what it means to fight for gender equality and against gender-based violence and femicide.
Good afternoon. Igama ufikile wakamasiko, ilunga leParliament. I'm also a member of the Committee for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Shaham Samai. I'm from the Women's Legal Center, which is an African feminist legal center, and we advance the rights of women through strategic litigation and advocacy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Matume Khanaga. I'm from the South African National AIDS Council, the Civil Society Forum, Men's Sector.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Liesel van der Merwe. I'm a member of Parliament serving on the Portfolio Committee of Social Development. I'm also serving on the Steering Committee of the Women's Caucus of Parliament.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nonumiso Nsibande. I am with Action Aid South Africa. Action Aid South Africa is a part of a federation operating in about 47 countries, and we are focused on tackling poverty and inequality.
Thank you very much, members of the panel. Now it's time for you to make your comments and raise questions to the panel. But remember, as you make comments, also make recommendations on what is it that we need to do. So I'll now bheka izandla abantu abafuna ukukhuluma. Abantu bangathunukali ne. Sifuna abantu abazophakamisa izandla sibakhombe bese siyaqhubeka. Okay, ngizocala 1 2 yeah 1 2 3 4 good, 2 members from a good, it's 5 ngani. The lady at the back and the lady in front, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We've got only 13 hands. Okay, number 1.
Thank you.
Number 1 was this, the lady in front here. Yeah, number 2.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kuki Moloi from the Ministry of Transport. Mine is a comment. I just want to say that we don't need to diagnose our problems. We know them by now. We have good policies, as indicated, in place. We just need to have a good integrated working system with relevant stakeholders, of course, which will lead to informed decisions, which will also lead to good planning, a good oversight structure, and monitoring and evaluation of the programs and interventions we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Gugu. Number 2.
Thank you. It's quite an honor to be here. My name is Zelna Jansen, and I have an advocacy and lobbying firm. I was listening to this morning to all the speakers, and from what I gather is that there is a problem with implementation. And if there's a problem with implementation, then we have to look at why oversight isn't working. And this is where oversight happens. So mine is more just a comment or something to think about is, maybe we should consider trying to close the gap between policy and lawmakers and the people on the ground, so that when departments come and do oversight, then MPs are more informed and can make better decisions, and that would also enhance the voice of Parliament if all those voices are included. So it's just something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Number 3.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Asanda Lobelo, and I am the SRC president at the University of Cape Town. And I just wanted to, I share perhaps the contribution, and I'll say I'm captured regarding implementation, but I also want to register a concern regarding many of the comments that were made today around tackling gender-based violence, tackling sexual violence and rape culture, and how it seems to be vested in mechanisms that want to increase convictions and increase, putting people behind bars, right? And I want to understand, or I want to put it to everybody that perhaps if that's the only focus of our plan, we end up taking rapists out of society and putting them in prison where they go and rape other prisoners, right? And go and undermine the rights, the basic human rights of other prisoners, right? And so by taking them out of society and punishing them, we've done nothing but not make them our problem anymore. But we haven't removed the underlying culture that is actually creating this environment where these actions persist. And so my contribution is that along with having a system of accountability through, police and the criminal justice system, there must be a social program that is driving this to change the culture around these kind of issues. And so how do we incorporate consent culture and teaching about consent culture into the strategic work of the Department of Women, Young Persons and Disabled Persons? And for me, one avenue in which that could be done is possibly through the Department of Basic Education and Department of Higher Education and Science and Technology, that department, and start rolling this thing out into our curriculums at school and relooking what is actually taught to children. How do we protect rape culture in how we teach children how to engage with one another? And then also, on the other hand, into incorporating... also incorporating it into the workplace, because much of this work
much of these suggestions that have been suggested are reactive. They require something to take place for them to be effective. But how do we remove those things taking place in society overall? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Number 4.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Puleng Pogoto, and I'm from the Good Movement. I just want to quickly speak to the issue of the scourge of femicide in this country, which I feel does not get adequate attention. The 2018 femicide stats confirm that there's an onslaught against women in this country. So if femicide is 5 times higher than anywhere else in the world, in this country, it means we're sitting with a grave problem here. I think one of the things that we have to do as women, one of the first things that we probably have to do as women, is to bring this issue, the issue of femicide, to the center of the agenda for the debate, the national debate for women. I acknowledge the fact that femicide is a multi-layered problem that requires a multi-dimensional approach to devise solutions, right? Tailored solutions to the problem. So while South Africa has many laws, as it has been abundantly made clear in this house today, I do think that one of the possible solutions that we should consider is to enact legislation that is tailored for the crime of femicide. There are only 18 countries in the world that actually have enacted a piece of legislation that deals with femicide. So I think this, while we have many other laws, I think the fact that we're dealing with an issue where women are killed. A woman is killed once every 8 hours in this country. That is a huge problem. With speaking, it's a matter of life and death. So I think that we have to exhaust all avenues, and legislation is one of the avenues that we definitely have to look at.
Time is up.
Thank you.
Number 5. Number 5, your time is running. For as long as you are not sure who must speak, your time is running.
Okay, good day. My name is Caroline Watson, and I'm from the Good Movement from Atlantis. My only question is, I would like to ask is why, if this platform can't involve more community workers, because at the end of the day, it's the community workers that implementing all the programs is the community workers that is active in playing a big role, especially in the women. If you look on the forefront, if there's a program that must be implemented, it's women that is on the forefront. So it's just a question or a suggestion that this platform must involve more community workers. And then the other question is the role, how do we play a vital role, because it's not only children and women that is being raped, because our boys is also be sodomized, especially in the school toilets. So how can we as women play an active role in, so that also can be recognized? Thank you.
Okay. Number 6. Press on.
Sorry, I've never been to Parliament before.
It's fine.
Total shutdown movement. I just wanted to respond quickly to Matale, the Deputy Minister of Police. He seemed very pleased with himself, with the statistics that he was giving us of 600 life sentences, or 585, I think he said, life sentences in the last. Outside Parliament, there's visual representation of women that were murdered in the financial year 2017-18. That was the work of the total shutdown outside. 2,915 women were killed in that financial year. 985 children were killed in that financial year. Now, for me, him praising himself of the life sentences that were passed in the last financial year, it shows me that he is actually not aware of the seriousness of this problem. 4,000 in comparison to 600 life sentences, I mean, for me, that's really not enough. And then I just also wanted to comment on the NSP that is being developed. We acknowledge the work the government has done since the total shutdown march in 2018. And the NSP was one of the demands of the total shutdown, demand number 4. I am very concerned. I mean, I can see the works being put in. It's, you know, I think it's going to be finalized at the end of September 2019. Again, I'm really concerned. You know, we are going to be all dead by then at this rate. It's going to be legislated, it's going to be funded. I mean, how long? I don't think we have time anymore. You know, the nation is running out of women. Sorry, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, number 7.
Afternoon, Chairperson. Chairperson, I think my comment is directed to we Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Steering Committee. Let's first comment the work that the President is doing and the road shows that are taking place. I'm not sure whether you know them, but there are road shows that are taking place. I think they finalized with the Eastern Cape. And then, but there is this steering committee. I know the resolution said so, that there should be a steering committee that works with the President in the office of the President. And then, can you maybe tabulate how is it formed? Because I know there is that committee now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Number 8.
I'm Jean. My question now to the panel. Why they think they can do better?
Where is number 8?
Because?
Oh.
Okay. My question is to the panel. Why they think they can do better for women and girls on the ground, meaning those are in Capelets who find themselves every day in a bed violence and in that situation. And the other thing is, if they can come, we can sit here and discuss and say everything, nice words and nice things. But end of the day, the people who are suffering are the people on the ground who doesn't even know that there's something like this here today. They don't, some of them, they don't even watch TV to hear what is going on because they are now being used on drugs, on selling drugs. The women are used, girls, young girls are drop out at school and they are not at school even now I'm talking to you. They are now the ones who carrying the bags for the drug lords. So what I think if we can go on the ground and work this thing on the ground, then we come here with a full information and full voice from them and telling and say, come here and say what the people are saying, that what we are saying to them. Thank you.
Number 9.
Good afternoon. I'm Shamsunisa, representing the Al Jamaa. My concern is the healing journey of the wounded. I just want to know, I mean, there is just not, there's a scarcity of holistic healing centers in South Africa for the wounded victims. And for example, if a person is wounded, the victim is wounded, the person has to reach out herself to go to somebody, to a practitioner, or to somebody, a therapist, and you know, and she's got to go back. The person, the victim, needs to go back to after a while. But there isn't a center, or there isn't a resource. There isn't resources to go to a specific space for her to carry on healing, because she's got to go back to the baggage and just move on and struggle on. I hope I'm being understood.
Okay. Panel members, did you get that? Okay, number 10.
Goeiedag al die mense, kan ek maar Afrikaans praat? Baie dankie. Ek is Miriam van Netterich. Ek wil net een ding gevra het.
You can take those things then for interpretation.
Ek wil net gevra dat ek wil graag weet hoe maak 'n mens as jy wil fonds hê vir jou kind as hy miskien ewers wil gaan soos oorsee of wat so iets van die aard. Dit is vir my kleinkind.
Did you hear that? May you please repeat your question again?
Gevra dit.
Oh, you heard it.
Okay. Ek wil net gevra het hoe maak 'n mens as jy fonds wil hê vir jou kleinkind as hy oorsee moet gaan op terp gekry het vir oorsee vir haar geleerdheid vir haar goed presentasie wat sy gekry het.
She wants to know where to source funds from for her child or grandchild to go and study or get an opportunity overseas. How to get the funding.
Number 11.
Thank you, Chairperson. One speaker earlier said that we are done with talking. Talking is over. We need to act now. I feel that we, as women, we are still marginalized in government departments, especially in strategic positions, the likes of Department of Justice and others. Women are losing cases, rape cases and murder cases at the court level. We need to find out what is going on. If those cases were being handled by women, I'm sure things will be different by now. I'll just make a typical example of my case. I lost my son in 2014 from a gunshot, and my son was shot by a policeman. I tell you right now, I've never been to any court, and my case was closed like that. And where I'm sitting right now, I feel that if ever it was a woman who was handling that case, who knows the pain of carrying a child for 9 months, will know the journey of carrying a child for 9 months, would have taken a different decision on this matter. Where I'm sitting, I don't know who killed my son. My son is dead, and I don't have a child.
Number 12.
Thank you, Chair. My concern is about modern slavery, that is women trafficking. And we know that it affects both women and men. I would like to suggest that we have a program, awareness program, focused awareness program that can communicate to the community about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Number 13.
Thank you very much, Chairperson of the session. My name is Ket Muji from the African Transformation Movement. I'm the National Chairperson for the Youth. And my submission is to say that for as long as you have a session of this nature and you get women in leadership positions who mock presentations of other women and who choose to politicize a session of this nature, whereby the certain remarks that are made, especially when Honorable Jordan from Freedom Front Plus was talking and Umama we IFP, whereby the certain utterances that were said to say that you must come back home and that sort of thing, where we are supposed to be coming together as South Africans, we will never see transformation in the society. And if we are going to sit here in the session and not appreciate the fact that there has to be a discussion on the issue of capital-based punishment, where you know that South Africans should be scared to commit crime, because at this stage, because there is no serious repercussion. Since the previous speaker was saying that kuna namhlanje, she lost her son and nothing has been done. So we as African Transformation, we are unapologetically saying that a capital-based punishment is key. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, honorable members and our guests. I think now I'll hand over to the panel to respond. Some of the things, it's the culture of Parliament. We as members of Parliament, there is nothing wrong for us to say to another member, "Ubuye khaya." It's our language. So it doesn't mean you are undermining a person or any political party. It's our language. We do it every day. So the member who was standing here, Ubabuncha Isa, is a member of Parliament. So we are used to it. Even some of the members, even a member of the EFF, Natasha, if you are listening to her, we're even laughing. It's our culture in Parliament, It's not that you are doing it in bad faith. But that's how we do our things, and it's acceptable in terms of the rules of Parliament. So it's for yourself, because you are not used to these things. We want to apologize because you are not familiar with our culture. But anyway, it's our culture. This is how we do things in Parliament. Yeah, we don't mean to offend anyone. Yeah. Yes, over to you, panelists. Anyone who want to start first? You must start this side. It's fine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just do want to comment on maybe one or two. The one is with regards to budgets. I think it's important to recognize that budgets themselves are an articulation of policy priorities. And so when we have a conversation around resourcing, we are having a conversation around what are the priorities that the country needs to focus on. And I certainly think that gender-based violence needs to be one of them. On the issue of implementation, I do want to stress that yes, it certainly is a big challenge. I think we need to be able to identify we need to recognize, let me just put it this way, we need to recognize response. That response is critical. Providing response services is critical, and so are prevention measures, support and care. By support and care, I'm talking about shelters, right? There's a study that was actually done by Hlanganisa Institute for Development in Southern Africa that was looking at the cost of shelters. And one of the things that they actually found was that to be able to properly provide quality services to a survivor of gender-based violence, to a woman and 2 of her children in a shelter, you need just a little over 7,000 rand. And what they actually learned from that is, if that is the case, then it basically means that we need to increase our current budget for shelters by over 2,000%. What is that telling us? It is telling us that we are not adequately resourcing these very important services. And I think it is critical moving forward, as Tamara put it, that we need to move away from talk. The game changer is definitely going to be around budgets. Gender-based violence is a crisis. The president has already said that this is a national priority, and because it is a national priority, let us allocate the necessary budgets to address this particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to all the comments that have been made. I want to add to what the previous speaker said. I think we all recognize that gender-based violence is a crisis. In fact, I think it should be declared a national crisis. Because as soon as you declare it as a national crisis, we are able to allocate the necessary funding for this fight. The biggest problem with us is we keep on talking, we come to Parliament, we raise the issues, we quote the statistics, we name the people who have lost their lives, but we don't allocate a cent to this fight. And I think that is what must change. United, whether we're black or white or ANC or IFP or DA, or civil society, non-profit organizations, we must declare that enough is enough. And I think our biggest crisis is the fact that there's no funding model, there's no costed, concrete plan to fight gender-based violence. And while we're all talking about this plan, this national development plan, this national strategic plan that is being developed, as the previous speakers have said, you know, again, it is a plan. A plan is nothing without action and resources. Now, until we get this plan, there are certain things that departments must do. First of all, budgets must be reprioritized. The Deputy Minister of Police told us today that rape kits will be rolled out in 3 years' time. People are being raped now. People are losing their lives now. So what we need to do is we need to ensure that the basics are in place, which means we need the Department of Police to focus on, for example, doing one thing, which is rolling out the rape kits. Secondly, the state has trained social workers. Social workers are sitting at home without jobs. Social workers must be absorbed into the system, and we must employ social workers where they are needed, whether it's at schools where bullying is prevalent or violence is prevalent, or at police stations where gender-based violence cases are most prevalent. I also think that, for example, that the funding of shelters and the support to civil society, it's non-negotiable. Civil society, NPOs and NGOs are already providing vital services on behalf of the state. They need our support. Do you know that we, in some instances, spend 5 rand on a woman in a shelter, but we spend 350 rand on a prisoner in jail? That doesn't speak to a system that cares for women. It must change. So we need to start thinking outside of the box. It's not difficult to reprioritize budgets as they are at the moment. So we need to ask government to start looking at that. The role of Treasury. Treasury must ensure that budgets for gender-based violence are ring-fenced. At this moment, we don't know where funds are going. Departments have got money, social development, etc., but we don't know how it's spent, so it needs to be ring-fenced. The role of DPME. The DPME, which is the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation, must ensure that all departments give us their plans. What are they going to be doing in this fight, this national crisis, to fight gender-based violence? And lastly, I think to the Chief Whip of the ANC and other MPs, fellow members of Parliament, I think the time has come for us to establish a stand-alone committee to oversight gender-based violence. The problem becomes gender-based violence cuts across different departments. It's education, it's social development, it's women in the presidency, which often means we lose track of issues, we lose track of budgets. We engage on these issues every now and then. We need a standalone department, oversight committee, that can deal with this issue. And then we can also address some of the issues that you've raised before, ma'am, the second speaker who said, how do we get communities and the people on the ground to be closer to the oversight committee, which is Parliament? I think a committee like that could have more time to engage with social workers, community workers, people who are fighting the fight outside, MPs and NGOs. So I think we also need a standalone oversight committee on gender-based violence, and those are my inputs.
Thank you very much, Honorable Van Merwe. But Chief Whip, Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, Deputy Speaker, last week, Monday, myself and the DG for Women, Deputy Minister for Women, we have checked with the Director General for SAPS on whether they have delivered the DNA test kits, which you call rape kits. And the DG confirmed to us that they have delivered. And even the researchers of the portfolio committee, I have assigned them to check whether those police stations do have those rape kits. And with the ones that they have checked, they have confirmed to me to say, Che, they are there. So for now, any one of you, if you go to a police station and you don't find them, please don't hesitate to call the portfolio committee secretary so that we can go and check which police station is that. Over to you, Ese.
Thank you, Chair. I think maybe taking on from what Honorable Van der Merwe raised is that, as a country, we do have an experience of dealing with an epidemic. I think the close example one can think of is how we responded to the HIV/TB epidemic and our approach to that in terms of how we institutionalize that process. And, through SANAC, which we formed in 2000, we established a platform in which government through the Interministerial Committee, private sector through the South African Coalition of Business Against HIV and Health, SAPCOA, I might be getting it a bit wrong, but also the Civil Society Forum, and meeting through the council, we were able to create a vehicle in which we could respond. And the important aspect of the council was that at the center, it was the affected community. So the people living with HIV were the driver of the process in terms of leading that process as civil society. And it comes to the issues that you raised, Asanda, in terms of how do we respond and not focus so much on the criminal justice system, but really look at preventing the epidemic. And it really speaks to putting communities at the center of the response. Because unfortunately, unlike the HIV response, in which we could rely heavily on drugs and clinicians to respond, in GBV, there is no vaccine for GBV. There's no drug for GBV. It's a purely social behavioral change program, which means we have to invest in people's thinking, in people's words, in people's behaviors. And that's an expensive project, very difficult to measure, very difficult to, we spoke about monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. How do you respond? It's very, social scientists will tell you that it needs a long-term plan. And the danger is that if we don't approach it like that, we might invest in what's easily measurable. Your Tutuzela centers, you can count how many you've built, how many people you've arrested, for how long, and it's numerical. But the GBV response, the femicide response, it will not be numerical. It's about, are you safe walking back from the club? Do you feel safe walking alone with your group of girls? And so it's very much to do with perceptions, but also, of course, reductions in rates around, not only reported, because we know there's issues around that, but actual cases of GBV and femicide. So that particular investment has to really be structured in a way that when we spoke about resourcing, it must be resourced within some form of a council. But more importantly also, I think that council also has to be integrated, because when we look at GBV, it's not only just psychosocial issues, but it's structural issues that has to do with the broader issues of inequality, because we know where there's inequality, there's higher rates of violence. We know that where there's poverty, there's higher rates of violence. We know there's actually the triple challenge that we speak about. So the priority will be to get that council up and running. Somebody spoke about speed. How long must it be? We must get that council up and running immediately. We've got the blueprint, get the councils funded as soon as possible. But lastly, it's also in terms of how do we integrate the policy as well as the grassroots that was raised. That councils must sit at the highest offices. So, it must be led by a presidency nationally. It must be led by premiers in provinces, mayors in districts and local, councillors in wards, all the way to community leaders in communities, so that you do have that integration between grassroots activism and policy, integrating in a seamless way without creating parallel structures.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Chief Whip, Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, Deputy Speaker, Chairperson of the Multi-Party Women's Caucus. This is the end of me now. Remember, I'm co-chairing with Honorable Sharif. For this session, she'll be the one who will be sharing. Thank you for your questions, for your inputs, and I'm confident that by the end of the day, we'll have a good report, and rest assured, it's not gonna be a talk show, and your comments are taken seriously, and they are going to be implemented. Thank you very much. Honorable Sharif.
Thank you, Honourable Member. If I could ask the next panelist to please continue.
Thank you. I think there is a broad acknowledgement in terms of most of the systems that have been put in place, but I think that it's also important that we do concentrate on the criminal justice system, because the major challenge is the impunity of perpetrators. We have to commend, obviously, government for beginning various robust programs and putting into place, for example, the Tutuzela centers, and we also have the sexual offences courts. But we also need to acknowledge that there is also major inequalities in relation to the support that are given to victims of violence, and in particularly women, children, as well as the elderly. Most of my colleagues have spoken about, the services in terms of shelter, etc. But I'm also going to focus on just the issue of secondary victimization of survivors as well as victims of violence. Because a major challenge when you do come into the justice system is the inequality of arms in relation to victims actually accessing legal services. Also, there isn't one uniform response, and it's critical when we look at the NSP in relation to TB as well as HIV. There was one uniform response in relation to if a victim of violence enters any system or any person or approaches any person possibly in the country, you would have one uniform type of response, because one of the major challenges for victims is if they have to be interviewed over and over in relation to the crime that has been committed against them. And that is a major challenge in terms of traumas that continues to affect these victims of violence. So one of the issues that or activities that we must really concentrate on is how does the frontline services look at all government departments, and not just that which is in the justice crime prevention cluster. From education right through to every department, it means that how does that look and what does that mean for victims of violence when they do enter the system. In addition to that, there is also, when they do enter the system, a major challenge is that there is a criticism that the law can be elitist and that the court in itself can be a violent space for sexual offences victims. And what do we do and how do we address that? We also need to look at funding in relation to legal aid services, because the fact is that if we have a human rights framework, the fact is that the court is there to be able to ensure that there is proper implementation. And how do we ensure that the courts are empowered to be able to do that, and also victims are able to survive the system in itself. And we need to be able to see how does that look within the system, through services in the system, and also to be able to allow them to be able to access legal aid services. But broadly, there is a lot of laws, and most of the departments have to work in a very integrated manner. And there needs to be focus on broader state accountability. And how does that coordination look between the Department of Social Development, SAPS, the NPA, as well as Department of Correctional Services? Because the legislation in itself makes that available. And the problem is that that needs to be resourced. It needs to ensure that the departments are able to to work with each other. Then I think the student from UCT, it's something critical. You are correct in terms of issues of prevention. We are dealing with the criminal justice system, which can be very reactive, but we need to have preventative programs that starts at our schools and even in our kindergartens. And how does that, or in the ECDs? And we need to work on preventative programs, and it needs to be resourced because behavior needs to change. And there needs to be a critical focus in relation to the Department of Education, and how does that look in ensuring that there's resources on how to deal with gender-based violence. Thank you.
Honourable Member, you are noted.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. Maybe one must start, Honourable Chief Whip, Honourable Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, Honourable Deputy Speaker, with the saying that says that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And I think, Chief Whip, this is a step that we have taken, as many others that have walked before us have taken the steps. But one thing that we know is that whereas we are taking many steps forward, we are also taking many steps back. And it is true, Honourable Chief Whip, that this animal of patriarchy will never, ever want us to succeed, because it really does want to take us back. So we do agree, honourable members and participants, that we are standing on great shoulders, and we should never, standing here, seek to reverse the gains that the forebearers that have fought before us to liberate us firstly from the shackles of apartheid. Ours is to then say that as much as patriarchy is moving forward, we are going to try and reverse the effects of patriarchy in our society. That's the first one. Secondly, I think, Honourable Chairperson, it's important for us as a society to say that as much as we have noted that the issue of legislation is there, the issue of implementation is now for us to talk about it and actually start acting. And the role of the committee or the portfolio committee of women, youth, and persons with disability is very important because it plays oversight. And Honorable Deputy Minister, I think when the President pronounced the amalgamation or this new animal of a department, it has given us an opportunity to reflect deeply as to what is it that as society or as this department we need to do for women and young women and children who are falling victim day in, day out of perpetrators. So it's important for us to actually look into the issues of resources, and also the issue of data is important on gender-based violence. I think, you know, sometimes we listen to statistics. So many women are being killed every day. So many women are being raped. So many women are being abused by their intimate partners. But what happened here today in this parliament, in adding faces to the actual statistics, is very important. Because for us, it speaks to that young woman who's called Letuk Tula, who was 21 years of age, who was studying and a student at the University of Zululand, who fell prey to her boyfriend, who killed her and buried her in a shack. And I think we need those shocking stories of women. The minute we start speaking about statistics, we start hiding the face of gender-based violence in our society. And when we go to bed at night, we forget about what is it that is actually happening to those families, to those communities, and also to our country, because when we're talking about resources, we should also start at actually saying what is it that is, how is gender-based violence costing us as a society and as a nation in South Africa. I have jotted down a number of issues that maybe we need to look into. And I know that as much as we are saying that we become a talk shop, but understanding that amongst us we have communities, we are having non-profit organizations, we are having the legislation, we are having the provincial government, national government amongst us, we are having our councillors. We know that moving from this parliament, we are going home to act because it all begins with us. We have made a commitment that we are not leaving any woman behind, and in doing so, we are saying that each and every responsibility of ensuring that women are protected begins with us here. And Honorable Chief Whip, the manner in which the invitations have been responded to, for me, it has been a resounding success. But I think we need more men to be involved in the fight against women. We cannot continue preaching to the converted. We cannot continue preaching amongst ourselves when our men are actually out there continuing to perpetuate the violence against us. We have agreed that increasing the budget for women development program should happen, and it must start happening now. We cannot sit and fold our hands when women programs are underfunded. Underfunded, yes, that's the correct word, thank you. So we should really ensure that when we are doing our budgeting, women or gender-sensitive programs are going to be taking priority. The second one is the issue of monitoring and evaluation, which is very important. We start by monitoring all government programs, and not only those that we think are closer or they are more, more societal in nature, or social in nature, sorry. Those programs, government programs dealing with economic development, we must start by them because sometimes you find that they are biggest culprits. Secondly, in the issue of monitoring and evaluation, the private sector is also the biggest culprit in terms of looking into women development and women emancipation. So it's very important for us to do that. The issue of strengthening economic development tools as well as financial management capacity building, as well as support to empower women is very important. I think in strengthening the economic development aspects, you would find that most of the time there is a narrative that says that women are staying in abusive relationships because they are not seeing an exit opportunity. And we cannot overemphasize the issue of the economic emancipation of women so as to enable them to have an escape route and be able to live after that. We need to intensify our food security programs, especially in rural areas, because sometimes it's the rural women that you find that are most affected. And those issues will also speak to issues of land. Women must have access to land, and they must have access to land right away, so as to ensure that women are able to make a living for themselves. Intensifying the 365-day program of no violence against women is also important. We cannot say that it's only the 16-day program which is important to us. 365 days of no violence against women should and must be our daily motto that we're living for. The Deputy Minister for Police has spoken about the issue of the provision of rape kits, but we're still saying that our police services must be able to offer a victim-friendly facility for all women who come and report issues of violence that they are experiencing, and that for us is important. Second to last is the issue of integration of the women with disabilities. When we are moving forward as women, we should never forget that there are those women that have or are living with disabilities that are also greatly affected by gender-based violence, and we should be making them a priority. Lastly, it's important for us to look into building a vibrant young women development program, Minister, because most of the time you would find that it's young women. Currently we are having a scourge of young women in and around South Africa, but we've noted here in Cape Town there's talk of Uyinene, who's a young woman from the UCT who has gone missing. A young women development program to capacitate young women to be able to stand and live for themselves without depending on men is important. Creating for us an economic opportunities, a Deputy Minister. When you are looking at the economic aspect, economic emancipation of young women, I know that there has been a program that has been committed to assist the girl child, which is the Sanitary Dignity Campaign. We support it, but we must also look into the economic aspects of that actual program in ensuring that young women are able to benefit. Lastly, we are talking of the
Please, can you start wrapping up?
we are talking about the 4th Industrial Revolution. And in that 4th Industrial Revolution, we are again saying, leave no woman behind. Thank you very much.
Can we have the next panel member? So I don't think that mic works, but you can use the roaming mic to just test if it works.
1, 2. One, two. Thank you, Chair. I think my fellow panelists have touched on many critical issues that needs to be addressed, and definitely through the lens of gender-based violence and femicide as it relates to cisgender women. For those of us in the room that does not know necessarily what cisgender woman is, these are women that were assigned female at birth and also then were raised as women and are quite happy to be women within society. Then we also get a group of individuals who are labeled as transgender women. These are women that were not necessarily born and assigned female at birth, but identify as women for all purposes within society.
And then broadly speaking also to people that transgresses the gender norms within society that we know as gender non-conforming persons. So I think when I speak through the lens of prioritization, then I speak to these very demographics that we advocate for within society. And so oftentimes the assumption is made that violence does not affect us. The reality is that violence does affect us. In many instances, that violence is invisibilized and it is erased as if it doesn't really affect us to the extent to which it affects cisgender women. And of course, this is not an Olympics of oppression in terms of who is the most oppressed and who's the least oppressed. But it does speak in terms of prioritization to how do we speak about equitable budgeting and equitable resource allocation through the work of implementation in the country. The investment that we put to fighting and combating gender-based violence and femicide with the aim of creating a future where diverse persons based on genders are equal in the country and empowered in the country is a short-term investment towards a sustainable future for the country. Unless the country is also saying that we are not going to prioritize gender equality, fighting gender-based violence in the preservance of a patriarchal world that we are existing in. So I think in terms of the prioritization lens for trans and gender diverse persons, in many instances the points or the sentiments have been shared that we are sitting with a very saturated policy domain that does speak to effective protections, but those protections don't always translate into the lived realities of women and of people in general in a way that seeks to affirm them. And I think from where we are positioned, that is not necessarily the case. The legal and policy landscape in the country still remains inherently violent towards trans and gender diverse persons. If we look, for example, the fact that the priority is to transform law, to review and transform law, so that trans and gender diverse persons are not denied by government the right to affirm our gender using the Alteration of Sex Description and Sex Status Act, because we do not have medical evidence to back that up, because also getting access to medical care is a big challenge for many persons, particularly those of us that are living within rural contexts where we're seeing that gender-affirming healthcare is issued at tertiary healthcare level and not at primary healthcare level. So at the intersection of a legal policy framework that fails us in terms of implementation and our lived realities, there's the intersection of violence. So when you present a particular way and the law does not affirm you, you're bound to be met with violence, whether it is going to be in the healthcare system, whether it's going to be in a police station, whether it's going to be with a social worker, that draws from the law to be able to understand how to engage the body. That particular mechanism has not effectively been worked on within this particular parliament and legislature, and it's something that can greatly aid us in terms of reconceptualizing how what dignity, equality, and a freedom free from gender-based violence looks like for trans and gender diverse persons. In addition to looking at the prioritization of law reform and policy development, there's also the prioritization of capacity development for service providers. What we are finding is that in many instances, as some of the panelists have outlined, that services are not effectively being rendered. In our instances, the services landscape does not speak to the needs of trans and gender diverse persons. So a trans person walking through the door of a healthcare provider will be alienated because a trans woman will not, a healthcare service provider would not know how to engage a trans woman that has the physiology of a typical male person. And that's a problem because it does speak to the gap in understanding and knowledge, and it translates into the education system and what is currently being taught within curriculum. So the structural forms in which violence are facilitated within this country becomes a very pressing issue for our community still, and I would think that for cisgender women, this is still the same thing. In terms of looking at how we empower civil society organizations to be able to effectively execute our mandate, and some of our panelists have outlined that in many regards, civil society organizations have taken up the responsibilities of government to be able to protect our communities and also to affirm our communities and promote their agency and autonomy. So the question that we have is that when funding is secured, when resources is secured for this particular programming, how will it flow to the communities on the ground that is supposed to benefit from it? One of the speakers earlier on alluded to the fact that who is actually behind decision making, who is actually behind implementing. And we must ask that critical question, because if it's men that's going to be making decisions around matters affecting women, it's problematic. If it is cisgender women and cisgender men making decisions about what happens to trans and gender diverse and LGBTIQ people, it's problematic, because based on our positionality, we would not be able to grasp the depth and the severity of the issues that the various communities would be faced with at grassroots level. So in terms of the politics of resourcing and the politics of funding, we definitely need to keep the implementation mechanism and oversight body accountable for the bodies that are actually doing the implementation work to ensure that we can work effectively towards the best possible outcomes for our community members on the ground. Yes, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before I allow the next panel member to address, I just wanted to say that as heteronormative and cisgendered women, we speak about equality all the time, but we have our own biasness that we don't realize when it comes to members of the LGBTIQA+ community and trans persons. So when it comes to the politics of queer bodies, we ourselves as cisgendered women become biased when it comes to their issues. And I think if we're going to speak about equality and if we're going to speak about intersectionality, then we must become aware of our own biasness so that we can make the space big enough so that those who are in the LGBTIQA+ community and those who are not gender conforming feel safe and feel that their views are being taken in these spaces. So I think it's very important for all of us to note, and when we go home tonight, let's look in the mirror and check our own biases. If I could allow the next panelist to please speak.
Great, thank you so much. So I think I'll speak more to the NSP, simply because I know there are some questions that were asked specifically about that, and the interim steering committee. I am representing the interim steering committee on gender-based violence, which was created through Article 3 of the declaration from the Gender-Based Summit. We will have a permanent council, or whatever that name will be, that will be installed when we complete the work that we've been assigned to do, and that will require legislation. So we actually are hoping that the members of parliament who are here listening will continue to follow the process. That support is really important and critical. And, you know, bring us back to resourcing. This NSP is a game changer, I believe, in the work that women in this country have put in place over the last 2 decades, actually working on gender-based violence. And the reason why I see it as a game changer is because for the first time, we don't have an NSP where a ministry, a government, a cabinet is saying, here's the NSP for gender-based violence. We actually have an NSP that is being developed in partnership with civil society and government, where members of different communities within civil society, including LGBTQIA communities, are represented, women with disabilities are represented in the process. So for those of you who are in provinces that are still to have consultations, and that is Gauteng, Free State, Northwest is this week, I believe, please do plug into that system. But I would love to give you an email address also at the end. Please catch up with me, because you do have an opportunity to submit comments on the NSP online or via an email, so that we truly are able to have an opportunity to hear from all of you. my belief is that it attempts to address a lot of these things, but just kind of rooting us back to resourcing. The first outcome on the NSP is about accountability and leadership. And there's a reason why, when we started this journey, the three main marches of the total shutdown in August last year were to Parliament, were to the Union Building, and were to the Supreme Court of Appeals in the Free State. It was about focusing on the reforms needed in the judiciary, in the legislature, as well as the leadership that it required from the highest level of office. We've done a lot of plans, and we've advanced a lot of ideas around how to resource GBV, how to, address GBV in this country. But I think where we are is that we need to absolutely agree, and I believe we do, that we have a national crisis. And therefore, our response cannot be business as usual. Our response has to be one that rises up to the level of what we deem a national crisis. I will give you an example. In Sierra Leone this year, there were 200 rapes reported, and the president declared a state of emergency. Because 200 rapes in that culture, in that country, was significant enough for that level of response. So what we are asking for in terms of a game changer on funding is take the fact that the president has accepted that this is a national crisis and begin to fund our response to addressing this scourge in a way fitting of a national crisis. Fitting of how we responded and prioritized water saving for Cape Town, as an example, in case we don't have really quick examples on that. But call it an emergency and respond to it as an urgent issue. When something is an emergency, you don't wait for a 3-year budgeting cycle. You don't wait for international funders to fund you because it's a national crisis. And I bring the international funders issue simply because to a certain extent, that has made us comfortable as a nation. What we need to understand is that this country guarantees us a constitutional right to safety. The reason the total shutdown gave the president 24 demands, it was symbolic of the fact that in 24 years of independence, women still are not feeling the right to this, that they're enjoying, and they've been granted this right to constitutional, to safety by the Constitution. So we need to begin to look at how we address GBV, not just as a problem that's out there, but how do we integrate it into what we consider to be brand South Africa? Do we want to be a nation that says we will send them to prison, or do we want to be a nation that proudly declares and says, people in our country are free, and what we mean by free is also that we have resourced our state, our local government, our provincial governments in a way that ensures the ultimate safety of everyone, including the women in the country. So when I look at the population of Khayelitsha, and I look at the number of police stations in Khayelitsha, and the 6 cars from the police station that are meant to service close to 1 million people, is that how we are responding to a national crisis? And is that contributing towards a culture of safety? There's several things that some of you raised here. One of them was the young woman who raised an issue around a culture of consent. And that's really beautiful, because we need to really begin to shift this issue. So consent so far has been the burden of the woman to say no. How do we begin to look at an NSP in a way that also resources the kind of work that needs to happen, so we begin to shift this burden of consent from women to actually creating and building a culture where somebody asks, is it okay to give you a hug? You know, especially if we're in a work setting environment where there are power issues. One of the outcomes of the NSP is on economic power. And it's very specific that we're not talking about economic empowerment here. We're talking about economic power. And that's important in a country where more than 50% of the population still lives on less than 50% of the average GNI. We are a country that still has huge inequalities. Poverty is violent. And the NSP and the that seeks to address GBV needs to address the issue of economic power, because that's actually what plays out in workplace sexual harassment. It's not about male-female sexuality or any. It is about it's a little bit about that, but it's mainly predominantly about economic power of also a people who are landless, predominantly. So how do we begin to connect all of the issues that this country is working on to ensure that when we say that addressing GBV is a priority, can we realistically look at our national budget and see a national budget that actually speaks to the fact that this is a national priority, a national crisis, and something that we are all united as South Africans to actually address, whether it's from education, from healthcare, or what have you, because it becomes part of us. You know, I'm reluctant lately to use the term Ubuntu because it's been commercialized so much. But what I really am trying to get to is, how do we get back to that point of reclaiming our Ubuntu of a South Africa that is truly, where freedom is defined by women who are also feeling that they are free, not because they can vote, but they are free because they can walk at night. They are free because they don't have fear of being violated. They are free because they can speak up. They are free because they live in a country that understands that they are not to be violated, not because they are mothers, not because they are sisters or aunts, but because they are women.
Please, can you start wrapping up?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tamara, I know that you want to round off the conversation. I'm going to be very strict on time. You have 2 minutes. Your 2 minutes already started.
Thank you, Program Director. And I'll take 2 minutes because I think the panelists responded to most of the issues. I think part of what was very useful, much of what we heard affirms some of our thinking around the resourcing of the NSP and also links to the respective outcomes. So the issue of strengthening community responses that a couple of people have raised, there's a lot of thinking around how do we resource rapid response teams at a local level that can respond to issues, but that can at the same time start addressing some of the issues that was raised by the previous speaker around healing that also came out. The issues of transforming the criminal justice system, looking at training, supporting and training frontline workers across different government departments, but also across civil society to play a much bigger role in terms of prevention. And then also addressing the economic drivers, integrating this work into poverty reduction or poverty eradication strategies, using platforms that exist like schools, like workplaces, also the household, and seeing how do we mobilize these different spaces to actually respond. So many of the areas touched on all the outcomes. The one last issue, the outcome 6 talks about research, it talks about multidisciplinary research and integrated information systems to strengthen what we understand and how we understand gender-based violence and how it affects particular groups of women and what does that mean for how we need to respond. As a country, we've played...
Your 2 minutes is up, but you can wrap up in 3 seconds.
Okay, 3 seconds. As a country, we've played a pioneering role in the world in terms of challenging apartheid. It's our opportunity to start showing the world how we can respond to gender-based violence and put the money where we need to.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Before I hand over to the Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, I just wanted to say thank you to the panelists for the information and the expertise that you have given. It's true. Yesterday at the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, LGBTIQA+ stakeholder, we have affirmed nothing for us without us. And it's very important that we ensure that the NSP is inclusive on everything that deals not only with those who are gender marked as women by birth, but also trans persons as well. And just a note, this chair is very comfortable. And as a young woman, it's good to dream. And one day you will see me in this chair. I thank you.
One thing, if the speaker cannot be strict enough, she will never get the chair. Because yeah. Thank you very much. And thank you to the panel. It was indeed a very good, I must say, but the problem is just that sometimes time doesn't allow us to say everything that we want to say. But we must also acknowledge the fact that so many people are still here to be part and parcel of this whole process. Let us continue and quickly give to the Deputy Speaker. The Deputy Speaker is not very happy with us. He's supposed to be preparing to go to Zanzibar tomorrow. And I insisted that he must come and do just a little bit of a summary of the deliberations of the day. Deputy Speaker, Lichisa Tsenodi.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson. But the true story is that a boy child had to be represented in this discourse. Otherwise, your discussions would be completely incomplete. And this is why I appreciated a few of the speakers who made this point strongly. I'm very pleased that we have this session today. And I do want to appeal to us. One young person said, we don't have enough aggression. We must recognize the value of coming together in this way every time. And one of those reasons is to appreciate the breadth, the numbers of people who are available, and the reality that things are changing in a variety of ways. Someone pointed out that this is the 6th administration and parliament, and there are new people in positions of authority. There are others who continue, there are others who have been placed elsewhere to continue the work. So there's a constant need to raise levels of awareness of where we are. Where is the journey? Where are we with the journey to in fact realize the provisions of the Constitution, which contains many of the things that we have said. It is actually improper that we have not arrived at them 25 years later. They are explicitly stated in the Constitution. My sister, you are right when you complain that sometimes the way Ubuntu is used can be very out of order. But no, we must not allow abusers to define the language we use. Ubuntu is an expression of humaneness that is universal. And so for that reason, it is appropriate that is in fact what we are reclaiming and seeking to reassert in a new dispensation. We are working still against the vagaries of the past. And so both the Constitution and the legislation that we have put in place speaks to the agenda that we are seeking to address. We have recognized here in a variety of ways inadequacies of that legislation. There are proposals for perhaps adding, if that is found appropriate, but law itself is inadequate. It's very clear. We have been told today. We are learning that in addition to law, which people must abide by, and the state must implement as effectively as it can, but we also need levels of awareness that begins in the home. The correct upbringing of children, to internalize ways of relating to one another, to reject violence as an instrument of getting things done, to reject abuse as a form of any relationship. So the institutions, that Constitution, by the way, including the laws it is based on, is informed by those principles of non-racialism, of democracy and of prosperity across the board. And those principles are those things that cannot change, like non-discrimination. I think the transgender comments and the comments about the LGBTQ+, is an important part of the raising of our awareness wherever we are located. We are not all at the same level of understanding. We do not appreciate things at the same level. So we must be patient with one another. When some of us are slightly back, that we must be pulled along gently so that we understand things properly, because when awareness raises, the grounds for better action increases as well. So I thought that I should point out those things. The machinery, the institutions that we have created, broadly speaking, the three arms of the state, supported by the institutions that support democracy, are crucial mechanisms for pulling us together and stepping in, such as the Commission on Gender Equality, for example, amongst others, how it would step in, or the Human Rights Commission when there's discrimination and so on. These institutions were designed in the Constitution for reasons of understanding that in the course of the traditional three arms of the state, things are going to fall between the cracks. Because the history of what we are going to solve is deep and long, and so you need institutions that will back those up. So those institutions are crucial for us when we meet like this to evaluate their work and the impact they are having on this agenda that we are talking about. Now,
Sorry, Deputy Speaker, I'm very, very sorry. There are 3 people that need to leave now, otherwise they will lose their flights.
I will do the Deputy Chairperson. Thank you, Ungshangen Duguza. It would be offensive of me to seek to summarize what happened here. I was merely sharing the insights that are figural to me sitting there listening here. We will sit together to thresh out what has emerged out of here, what are the practical things that we should go and do. But I also want to, just as a tribute to other men, we will give to the organizers together that we must contain wise words from men in leadership positions who have spoken on this agenda, so that we recognize we are carrying on a fight that is worthy of all of us, including in the smallest units of our homes, the humblest and so on. I do agree with the young girl who said, capitalism is hurtful. Patriarchy is its handmaiden. It creates conditions for the continuations of the problem we are confronted with. How we approach it is absolutely crucial. If we don't deal with the roots, we will do nothing to the effectiveness of our agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Deputy Speaker. I didn't want you to stop. I just wanted the ladies to leave. Sibongile Nhlapo, Fetsang Molosiwa, and Gcinile Nsibande. You must leave now, ladies, because your flights, we don't want you to miss your flights. Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker, and thank you because it's the responsibility of the two of us to make sure sector parliaments took place and this program is a success. So thank you very much. We will give now over to the Chief Whip. The Chief Whip of the Majority Party for the whole year have been on our necks to say that we must make sure that we donate some dignity back, some just commodities, things that we need to donate, and we have been donating. Afterwards, she told us that she's going to give us a surprise at the Women's Parliament by handing over something. It is now the opportunity of the Chief Whip. Chief Whip, give her the roving mic so that she can use that. There is a roving mic here. So thank you very much. Ladies, you can see there is bags that are being distributed. I'm very sorry that it is not branded because we couldn't get a service provider that can provide the bags in time, but I insisted you are not going to leave here without a token. That shows us that we appreciate you. Thank you.
Presiding officer, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Nibahle man. TJ Pemza, TJ Waichukucha, TJ Guzeguse. Oh, Makoskas, what a day. It was not a mistake that God created a man first and decided later on to create us. Anyway, when you create something, you start with a draft work, eh? You start with a draft work. Then you look at the draft work and say, now I must come with the masterpiece. God created the draft work, look at the draft work, put the draft work at the Garden of Eden and say, go, there's everything in Eden. But that draft work could not see a thing. He went up and down, up and down. Then God said, oh my God, let me come up with a masterpiece. Without taking that draft work to any theater, he just took a rib and created an unbreakable and created the real person and created a real woman, a woman of substance. This is who I am, a woman of substance. Even at the time when the snake approached, where was Adam? He was nowhere to be found. Who negotiated with the snake? It was a woman. It was a woman. By the time Adam came back, said, let's eat. Cook rand, I forget you up. The middle tree, eh? The middle tree. Okay. Then when God came back to ask, have you eaten? Listen to the response. The woman, affirming the woman you gave to me, told me to eat. That's an affirmation of a woman. Today we are here to affirm and endorse those women. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today because there are also some women who stood up and said, when they've been abused, when they are crying, when they are breaking, they need somebody to embrace them. We have shelters. We took only 2 shelters. All what you see here, members of parliament donated from the napkin up to the last thing, toys, sanitary towels, hey, everything. Across political parties, because we said, if women stand up, united, one voice will overcome. Allow me to tell you about only 2 shelters. Siza kuyenza place of women and children. It is in Philippi. Once it is in Philippi, you'll understand the magnitude of issues that they are dealing with. House Mother Zanele Mapina, where is House Mother? Zanele or the rep? Where Zanele? Can you come forward, Zanele? Can you come? She's the house mother. Siza kuyenza into yoba bakhuseleke amakhosikazi. There are currently 10 women and their children housed at the shelter as I speak. The ages of the children range from a newborn, a set of triplets who are only 3 months old, a 3-year-old toddler, and an older children ranging from 12 to 15 years. They are kept by her. And the team at Siakuyenza Place for Women and Children. They are providing them with free health and wellness services, a child protection program, a safe house for women and children, counseling programs for local communities on the Cape Flats, on substance abuse, victim empowerment. I became a victim at the time the perpetrators approaching me. But if he did not succeed to kill me, I'm a survivor. And I cannot live a victim mentality. They also make it a point that those women and children get psychosocial support. Mama, umsebenzi ongako wenzayo. Yima apha ulinde ipartner yakho. Sarki Batman Women's Center, what a name. What a name, Auntie Sarki. This is in Menenberg. Our house director is Mama Bernadine Becker. Where is our director? Here is our director. A round of applause. Madam, it takes a woman with a heart to say, your child is my child. And these are the women that are saying that. At any given time, the center caters, underline, for 120 women and children of all ages. It's a one-stop center for women and children who are survivors of abuse. The vision is the creation of a safe and secure society and human rights culture where women and children get empowered, where women and children can be free in their own country. This center also provides 24-hour emergency shelter, short and medium-term residential care, child care services, counseling, mental health support, children's counseling, research in gender-based violence, legal advice, and job skills. We agreed as Parliament that we are an activist Parliament. These are our deliverables coming to you, ladies and gentlemen, that are here today to witness and to be part of this day. We are saying as members of Parliament, Mamburoto, we are saying as members of Parliament, please receive from us these gifts. This site is you, Mama Sia Kwenza, come this site, Mama Sarah Patman. These are all gifts that are coming from all of us. This is not government's money. There are some ministers and deputy ministers who out of their own also contributed to this. We have marked them nicely. Eunice, that lady, Eunice Fanek, she took all the time to tie them in this pink, because in most cases, women are also survivors of cancer. So we always get in touch with that pink color. She's the lady that made it a point that as you're putting them in the trolley, she was putting them together. These are your contributions. There are those who have not yet, as yet donated, members of Parliament. I can see you. I can see you. I can see you. But what we're going to do, honorable members, don't feel bad. We will do this on a monthly basis. We'll do this contribution and target different centers. Allow me not to read all that is here, but it's well marked. Here is content of toys in this one. Soap, body lotion, cologne, washing rags, gloves, and everything. This is what we're bringing to you. It might look small, but all these come from our hearts. Because we're saying we might not have money, but out of Ubuntu, in the true context of Ubuntu, let's give you support where you are doing such a beautiful work. We have heard that you want to be assisted through Public Works, that Public Works must donate the building that you are using. We'll assist you to apply to Public Works because we don't know what are the procedures. We know, Mama, from Siaguyenza, that you are requesting that we must speak to Transnet to donate to you a container where you can store things when you are donated or you have purchased. We all appreciate all the good work that you are doing. We don't have gold and silver, neither diamond and platinum to thank you, but ours, ngegama. Ameni? Ukona u ameni? Be bright in the corner. Be bright in the corner. Ladies, be bright in the corner. Ladies, be bright in the corner. Where you are, where you are. Where you are, banikezelele. Hand over. Oh, injalo. You are, ithathe nje umnike. Mabroto. Where you are, where you are. Ladies, be bright in the corner. Where you are. Ladies, be bright in the corner. Ladies, be bright in the corner. Ladies, be bright in the corner. You are where you are, where you are, where you are, where you are, where you are. Oyiyo, oyiyo lendlela. Iyo lendlela.
Can the babes please come this side?
Iyo, oyiyo lendlela. Iyo lendlela. Iyo lendlela. Teta, kawutete Satane. Teta Satane. Teta Satane. Dodo, kawutete Satane. Teta Satane. Teta Satane. Londlelo, ayifuni magwala. Iyo lendlela. Iyo lendlela. Londlelo, ayifuni magwala. Iyo lendlela. Iyo lendlela. Thank you.
Can we please just give an opportunity? And in the same vein, we will ask Mayor Dorothy Mabileta to come to the front also to do the vote of thanks after the representatives from the shelters have expressed their appreciation.
My name is Sanele Mapina from Sizaguyenza, that is based in Philippi. I just want to greet everybody here, Honorable Speaker, all the people are here. We just want to say thank you on behalf of our director, Helen, Miss Bernard, who's sitting there at the back. I want to say thank you to everybody who's sitting here, more especially from the people that they give us the donation. May God bless you, whatever what you've done for us. We really appreciate everything. Amen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Bernadine Bacher from the Saki Bartman Center for Women and Children. I'd just like to say, first of all, it's been an absolute honor to be here today on this historic occasion and to be part of this process and to see us going forward to getting the National Strategic Plan in place. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much for the wonderful donations. We look forward to partnering with the NCOP in the future and bringing all of our power to bear to protect and empower and look after the most vulnerable members of our society who are our women. So thank you very much. Let's keep up the good work. Let's go forth and take all the power that we have in this room and do this. Thank you.
I just want to request that after the vote of thanks, let us not leave. I just want us, all of us that are still here, to observe a moment of silence then for all women who died because of gender-based violence, but in particular also for Mamtandi Ndlovu, who did a lot to empower women in the construction. Yes, so over to you, Dorothy.
Chief Whip, Deputy Chief Whip, Speaker, a women's desk, and everybody who was here. We have to agree that this was a great day. Yes, as I was sitting there and listening from all of us debating and talking from our hearts and representing the community out there about women issues, I could see that really this room, all of us here are activists. So I would like to thank you, Chief Whip, for organizing this event. Because if we are not going to be here and represent the people out there, and even represent ourselves, even us here, who know we have experienced all these issues, nobody's going to do it. It has to begin with us. It has to begin with me. It has to begin with us. So this day is the beginning, and there's going to be many, many of these. So what is left? What is going to happen? You heard the song here, brighten the corner where you are. So where you are, people must see that you are really an activist. You are really a role model. And you go out there and we do exactly the outcomes that we have discussed here. We will support this Chief Whip, all of us. And I'm saying thank you. This was a great day.
I think all of us have been thanked properly, and we also really want to thank the speaker for availing this chamber for this event. When we went to the speaker with the Chief Whip, myself and the Chief Whip, I actually said to her, Speaker, we will understand because we know there is some security kind of considerations. But just think of that woman who will never become a parliamentarian, but will have the opportunity today to sit inside of the chamber. Speaker was like, I must first find out, and I will come back to you. I was not even in my office, and the message followed me. Speaker, I have agreed. I said, at that moment, it felt like, wow, really, are we going to be in the chamber? And particularly for the women that didn't have that experience yet. Ek is nou 'n hand van die premierskap af het ek nou baie hier gekom. So, but I really want from the side of the Deputy Speaker and the Deputy Chairperson's office, my office and the Deputy Speaker's office, we want to appreciate the role that the Chief Whip's office have played. Just for us to get this event programmed. Because to put something in the program, You must now grovel in front of the whips and the chief whips in Parliament. So thank you, because of the fact that it was short notice, it was very late. And I always say we measure success by the attendance of those that are interesting parties. And your attendance today, I am going to take this credit just for a moment. The office of the Deputy Chairperson, take credit for this moment. Our first major project was so successful. Thanks to the input of everyone that was involved, because you cannot take credit if so many people have assisted you to make sure that it is successful. Last night, we were told that the service provider could not provide bags. And it was just before I was going for my prayers. I must tell you this. It was just before I was going for my prayers, because I'm having a novena that I'm praying, so I have a certain time that I must pray. So at that specific moment, this message came through from Mr. Taso, and the chief whip also phoned me, Sibulelo phoned me, and I said to myself, I'm going to send Mr. Taso a message. He will hear from me. So I went and I started to send the WhatsApp, and I said, oh, it's really a pity. It's so unfortunate. It's me now, the one that was sending this message, but I thought I'm going to pray just now. I cannot send him this hot message. But I did say to Sibulelo, tell Mr. Taso, there is no reason for me to smile because Colgate is very expensive. So I will not smile if there is not something that the women can take from this event. Thank you very much, Mr. Taso. Thank you very much, particularly Sibulelo. We went on constituency for 2 weeks. And she, because we are still waiting for staff in our offices, she worked for that 2 weeks to struggle to get the concepts and things that we have discussed and everything. And we must give people due recognition for what they do. I believe in that. So I really just want to the Executive of Parliament, but particularly to the Chief Whip's office, particularly to the Deputy Chair's office, because you are nothing without the team that is working with you. I want to really express our appreciation to the project team, the project leader, Mr. Taso, and the team. We want to say, Mr. Jimmy Basson used to say, there is the round characters and there is the flat characters. There is the backroom operators and there is those that are on the platform. To the backroom operators, we really appreciate what you've been doing. We really appreciate what you've been doing. Chief Whip have said she will thank those that gave big donations, and she will just say thank you to those that gave small donations. But in the end, it is the thought that count. And Chief Whip's office have been, since Mandela Day, been on us to make sure that we are donating. Thank you also for that patience from your side to inform us and to be the one that makes sure that the Chief Whip is, I know her from very far, she's a bully and she's a bulldozer. We used to call her the general at one stage as MPLs because she liked to command. But this time around, whenever she's very high, Fikile and myself will just look at one another. And then we will come back and we will just say, no, Chief Whip, it's fine. We understand where you are coming from. And then we move. Thank you very much. It was really nice to work with you guys. It was really nice. Can we now have a moment of silence? Let us observe a moment of silent prayer. The people outside say they don't see us pray in Parliament. Because under this roof, there are people with different beliefs. But when we say a moment of silent prayer, the one that make life worth your while, that make sure that you wake up every morning, it's to him that we give praise and thanks. And we also give a moment of silence for Metandi Ndlovu. It's someone that we work with in different areas. And tomorrow will be her funeral. And it is a great loss indeed for the nation. Let us have that few moments of silent prayer. We extend this moment of prayer to each and everyone that have actually been killed by gender-based violence, what we call femicide, but we know it is just cruelty that is out there. And if none at all is happening, may those that are perpetrators of this violence think twice before they start and kill the next person. Women in particular are the ones that are victims of those. Let us just really observe this thought of special grace for them. And may the souls of the dearly departed rest in eternal peace. Amen.